For those who aren't aware, the 2019 UK general election is coming up on the 12th of December, and in the run-up I'm putting on hold some of the other content I was working on to talk specifically about relevant matters. Frankly, what I'm talking about in this video seems to be never-ending at this point, so in the interest of releasing this video in a timely fashion, I've had to trim out some examples and sort of set a cut-off date to release it in time, like before the election ideally. With that in mind, I proudly present a guide to Tory electioneering. Tip 1. Sloganeer. Slogans have long been a part of political campaigning, memorable sound bites to help embody the policies of a party and stick in the mind of the target audience. However, presumably inspired by Boris Johnson and co.'s success with Brexit-specific slogans such as the entirely contentless "Brexit means Brexit," the generally example-less "Take back control," and the dismissal of any information which the Brexit campaigners didn't like as "Project Fear," the Conservative Party has now adopted a dialect composed almost entirely of catchphrases. Each of these is immediately memorable and repetition of it can avoid some scrutiny. For example, the Prime Minister may be unable to actually describe any oven-ready trade deals, but that doesn't stop him talking about them.
How many are oven-ready?
There are a number that are oven-ready. I'll have to come back. I'll have to come back and give you the
15?
The number. There are a number that are virtually ready to go. But
however, the most important is undoubtedly get Brexit done.
Get Brexit done. Let's get Brexit done. Get Brexit done. Isn't this a wonderful box?
This last slogan is particularly powerful as it not only gets a large swathe of the population on board, both those who want Brexit and those who are tired of hearing about it, but it is also so non-specific that it doesn't pin you down to any actual policies or results. Make sure to repeat it as much as possible, especially if there are any questions which you don't want to answer. Branding in general is important. While Jeremy Corbyn, Joe Swinson or Caroline Lucas are usually referred to by either their whole names or just their surnames, it's very important to call Boris Johnson Boris to reaffirm his image as a sort of bumblingly affable chap. It's very important that people see him more as likeably incompetent than actually malicious. Note that there have been some less successful slogans in the vein of Theresa May's widely mocked strong and stable. For example, a recent attempt, Britain deserves better, has been roundly lambasted by people highlighting the absurdity of the incumbent government complaining about the failings of the current government. If something gets adopted in the vein of the Britain deserves better than the Tories hashtag, it might be best to drop it and just say, get Brexit done again. Tip 2. Deflect. If you're ever asked a question which you don't want to answer, for example, one which asks about any of your own policies or actions, you should divert the conversation back to either Brexit or Labour. In particular, pretend that Labour campaigning for a second referendum is a sign of indecision.
Dither and delay.
Or that Corbyn's personal opinion on it is more important than the party's stance.
Jeremy Corbyn, Mr. Corbyn, cannot tell us which side he would campaign on.
Or go back to the time-honoured Labour is anti-Semitic smear, although this one may not take depending on how familiar the audience is with your tactics.
There is one thing that I am more passionate about ridding from our politics than anything else.
Honestly.
And that is the anti-Semitic...
Oh my God!
Handy questions to steer the conversation away from as much as possible are things like, why are you refusing to release the report of Russian interference in Brexit until after the general election?
The question was, when will you release the Russian report?
Let me tell you,
this is the report into whether or not there was Russian interference or any kind of influence.
There is absolutely no evidence that I know
If that's the case, then why not release it?
To show any interference in any British electoral event. And the reason I won't is I see no reason, or the reason I decided not to ages ago, is because I see no reason to interfere with the normal timetable.
The normal timetable? Hold on, that's not true. That is not true.
Or, so what's your manifesto costing?
What is the cost of Johnson?
Well, we've been very clear about our responsible approach to economic management.
What's the total figure then?
We will not borrow for day-to-day spending.
But hang on a second, what's the total figure? You've just put a figure on what you say the cost of Corbyn would be to individual families. I'm asking you, what is the cost of Johnson?
So we don't think we should borrow for day-to-day spending, and our spending plans, as they've been outlined, are constrained within...
That wasn't my question. If you're coming... No, hang on a second. If you're coming on the programme making claims about the opposition that you know perfectly well they object to and say are false, I'm asking you just to say openly what you believe the cost of your plans will be.
So let me outline. So we do not think you should borrow for day-to-day spending. The forecast...
Or perhaps, what happened to those 200,000 starter homes you were building?
The Conservative pledged to build 200,000 starter homes in 2014, and none of those have been built.
You can't get called out for your stance if you aren't expressing your stance, but you know how it's even harder for people to call you out? If you aren't there at all. Tip 3. Avoid. You can't trust the public. You never know what they might say. Boris Johnson's definitely fallen foul of this on past photo ops.
Where is it? You're hitting Morley in Leeds. You should be in Brussels, leading the British people to negotiating against leaving the European Union.
Unfortunately,
you are playing games.
I'm not very happy about talking to you, so if you don't mind, I'll just tell me what I'm doing. If she's not able to express, I don't want you to go.
Hello. My daughter nearly, the consultant didn't come in. There are not enough people on this ward. There are not enough doctors. There are not enough nurses. Right. The NHS has been destroyed. It's been destroyed. It's been destroyed. And now you come here for a press opportunity.
Well, actually, there's no press here.
What do you mean there's no press here? Who are these people?
And even in cases where he's vetted the audience, like at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, one stray medical student slipping through the cordon can really mess up a good media stunt.
I'd also like to ask you about your awareness of the health crisis and the climate crisis.
And I was told I wasn't allowed to ask him any questions, which I think is a really good sign. This is a PR stunt. People who work in this hospital know the reality of cuts.
This is why, for safety, you should try and limit your exposure to those who can be relied upon to throw softball questions as much as possible. This is why, for example, the sixth form students were kept in their classrooms and out of Boris Johnson's way when he visited George Spencer Academy in Stapleford. However, if there is one group even more dedicated to asking questions than students, it's journalists. Debates should therefore be avoided at all costs. After a difficult showing at the first public debate between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister cancelled the upcoming debate. For Channel 4's climate change leaders debate, Boris Johnson refused to appear, although he did send not only Cabinet Minister Michael Gove, but also, for some reason, his father, who doesn't hold a government position for the record. Channel 4, in this case, refused to allow uninvited stand-ins to take the place of the leader of the Conservative Party in her leaders' debates, replacing both him and the Brexit Party's Nigel Farage with melting ice sculptures.
The leaders of Britain's biggest parties were all invited. 5 of them are here. The Liberal Democrats, the Scottish National Party and Plaid Cymru, Labour and the Green Party of England and Wales. We kept the invitations open to the leaders of the Conservative Party and the Brexit Party. They have not taken up their places yet. Instead, a reminder, the ice caps are melting as politicians around the globe fail to cut greenhouse gas emissions in time to stop rising temperatures.
Even if you are in the building, if you sense that difficult questions are going to come up, just refuse to come out.
It was supposed to be filled, I should say, by the chairman of the Conservative Party. Where is he? He's probably 15 feet away from where I'm standing, just at the moment. I've been in to see him during the break. He said he wasn't due to come and talk to us today, although they had said that they would talk to us. I wanted to ask him about things like this, which is the front page of The Telegraph, the tragedy of the modern Labour Party, and the boss, comparing Jeremy Corbyn to Stalin.
There was also a recent string of interviews with notably combative journalist Andrew Neil, where other parties had the interviews in good faith, and then the Conservatives refused to book a slot, saying instead that Boris Johnson would like to have his interview with the less dogged Andrew Marr. The BBC took a stand and said that Boris Johnson couldn't have an interview with Marr until he'd done one with Neil. However, Johnson managed to get around this by organising an Andrew Marr interview to speak to the nation in the wake of a terror attack on London Bridge, and then using that for electioneering rather than its proposed purpose.
We have a fantastic agenda for this country.
And this brings us on to our next point. Tip 4. Utilise the media. The media is generally more friendly to the Conservative leadership than the Labour leadership. A common comparison is these two headlines from the Sunday Express. The first is about a Labour proposal to raise the minimum wage to £10, titled, "Labour's minimum wage plan could cost you your job and send unemployment soaring." And the second is about a Conservative proposal to raise the minimum wage to £10.50, titled, "Boris Johnson's plan to raise wages across the country receives huge boost from experts." However, for best results, you should probably give the press a little nudge.
I invite all wonderful colleagues in the media to redouble their efforts, to send out search parties, to find this elusive, this like Shergar, this fact that I think a great deal depends on members of the public would be fascinated to know.
It's also important that anyone who steps out of line is put in their place. After Channel 4 replaced the absent Boris Johnson with an ice sculpture, a Tory source said that the party would review Channel 4's public service broadcasting obligations if they win this election, to look at whether its remit should be better focused so it's serving the public in the best way possible. Especially relevant as the broadcaster's licence will need renewing in 2024, potentially during the next parliamentary term. Conservative spokesman Lee Kane also wrote to UK Broadcasting Regulations Board Ofcom demanding an investigation. Unfortunately, the investigation found in favour of Channel 4, but it was worth a shot, eh? Either way, this should help foster an atmosphere where rather than just attacking the opposition, you may find yourself being blessed by happy little accidents, like the BBC using 3-year-old footage of Boris Johnson laying a wreath at the cenotaph instead of the 2019 footage of him doing so upside down.
Announcing new measures for armed forces. The Conservatives are pledging new protections for soldiers from legal action against accusations of wrongdoing on the battlefield. Labour say they'll increase pay for armed forces and improve accommodation. The Liberal Democrats are announcing a £10,000 skills wallet for adult training.
Or cutting out audience laughter when the Prime Minister claimed to care deeply about the truth at the first debates.
How important is it for someone in your position of power to always tell the truth?
I think it's absolutely vital.
How important is it for someone in your position of power to always tell the truth?
I think it's absolutely vital.
Even still, you can't rely on favourable coverage all the time, as evidenced by this tweet from the BBC asking the Conservatives not to use edited BBC footage to mislead the public in their advertising. And that brings us to our final and most important tactic. Tip 5. Just f***ing lie.
Does the truth matter in this election?
I think it does. And I think it's very important. I think it's very important.
While the Prime Minister was being laughed at the first debate for claiming to value honesty, the Conservative Party press office, CCHQ, had decided to rebrand its Twitter account to Fact Check UK, including a new fact-checking friendly logo and tweet messages such as Fact, wages are raising, the proportion of low-paid jobs is at a record low. Fact, Corbyn's Labour would spend £1.2 trillion over the next 5 years if they get elected, the equivalent of funding the entire NHS budget for 9 years, and eventually, Boris Johnson is the clear winner in tonight's #Leaders debate. This drew widespread criticism, including condemnation of Twitter for not closing the account, or at least removing the verified checkmark. However, Twitter chose to issue a warning that if the stunt was repeated they would take decisive corrective action, and then chose to focus on the real issues, such as suspending the account of actor Ralph Little for parodying the situation by rebranding his Twitter account Conservative Press Orifice. When questioned about this, responses varied, from Boris Johnson claiming to be unfamiliar with it.
Can I ask about the Conservative Party's decision to change its online Twitter feed to fact-checking UK as an example of it's been accused of being fake news? Does that undermine trust in the Conservative Party?
Well, Rowena, I'm afraid that the Twitter sphere is not really my province. But what I can say is that I'm informed that the Labour have some sort of operation which is very similar to this. But I haven't followed this Twitter stuff with perhaps the attention that you would like, Rowena.
To Michael Gove saying,
one of the things about fact-checking is that it's important that we do have independent corroboration. That's what we did last night.
That wasn't independent,
Jeremy
that was the
Corbyn's.
To Dominic Raab saying that
no one gives a toss about the social media cut and thrust.
The fact that the Conservative Party press office so barefacedly attempted to deceive voters should be a shock, but let's not forget the pedigree here. The party leader, Boris Johnson, may have a shaky history with lies. He has been fired multiple times for lying in the past, once from the Times over fabricating a quote, and once from his roles as Conservative Party Vice Chairman and Shadow Arts Minister for lying about an affair. However, where a weaker man may have decided to at least put on a semblance of trustworthiness, good old Boris doubled down. Buoyed by the success of his old articles about EU regulations on bendy bananas and his complete lack of accountability for breaking manifesto promises as the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson became a key figure in the Vote Leave campaign, touring the UK on a bus which claimed that the UK sent £350 million a week to the European Union, and this money could be redirected to the NHS instead. And when this campaign defied the odds and won the referendum, leading to Boris Johnson's eventual promotion to Prime Minister, and the public accepted the shift from Brexit being the easiest deal in the world to no deal being a viable option, and when myths such as this viral list about the Lisbon Treaty seem ubiquitous among Brexit supporters, it's no surprise that the truth should take a real back seat. And this is perhaps why the Conservative Party election campaign at this point has become more of a disinformation campaign. The Tories invented a cost of £1.2 trillion for the Labour manifesto.
Fact is, people have a right to know what a Labour government is likely to cost them. A Labour government is likely to cost them a lot. We've done our best possible job with the information that's out there to come up with an indication of what that Labour government is going to cost.
Based on assumption. No, but it's based on assumptions and misinformation. It's fake news.
And that net migration would rise to 840,000 as a result of the same manifesto, even though it hadn't yet been released. They've promised to build 40 hospitals, but are only funding the rebuilding of 6. They say that they'll build 60 new youth centres despite closing more than 750, or add 20,000 more police officers after their cuts reduced the force by 21,000. And I'm talking about the major politicians here, not small MPs like Lee Anderson, who was recently caught on a hot mic prepping a friend to pretend to be an unknown voter while the media followed him campaigning.
Just make out you don't make out you know who I am. You know I'm the candidate, but not a friend. All right. Hiya.
Hiya.
I'm Lee Anderson, your parliamentary candidate for the Conservative Party. How you doing? I recognise you. It's Steve, isn't it? Yeah, I recognise you. How you doing, mate? All right.
Yes, I'm
just doing a bit of last-minute campaigning. Are you going to be voting on December the 12th? And do you mind me asking which way you're going to go this time?
Well, I'm going with you.
Not potential gaffes like Boris Johnson promising the people of Telford that he wouldn't close their A&E shortly before Matt Hancock had to inform the people of Telford that their A&E was closing.
When Jeremy Corbyn came to Telford recently, he pledged to save the A&E in Telford. It's one of the primary concerns for people in our patch. What's your response to that?
Well, thank you, Nick. And I'm looking at Matt Hancock here because I know that that we have kept the A&E open, and we will ensure that it is open, and I will absolutely insist on that. And I know that Matt will be very happy to give you more details about that afterwards.
This is deliberate, top-down, and planned in advance. The Conservative Party bought the URL labourmanifesto.co.uk and filled it with purported Labour policies, and then paid for advertising to have it appear at the top of Google search results when the actual Labour manifesto was launching. They edited a video of Shadow Brexit Secretary Keir Starmer to cut out his answer to a question about Brexit to make it look like the Labour Party had no plan.
Why would the EU give you a good deal if they know that you're going to actively campaign against it? Why would the EU give you a good deal if they know that you're going to actively campaign against it?
Well,
Which is
Piers,
clearly what most of you are going to be doing.
Well, Piers, I have been talking to the EU, to political leaders across the EU 27 countries.
They released an edited older video of Labour MP Jess Phillips to appear to criticise the Labour manifesto.
So should we take no notice of manifestos?
To be perfectly honest, I think that there is an argument to be said that you can never ever deliver all of those things that you're pretending that you can deliver when you go to the electorate.
They edited BBC footage to make it seem that the presenters were explicitly endorsing the Conservative Party.
Pointless delay to Brexit.
Another Brexit delay.
They've been handing out election leaflets designed to look like local newspapers. Boris Johnson recently said that this whole election has come about because he couldn't get a Queen's speech through Parliament.
You're leader of the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party has been in power for 10 years.
One of the reasons we're having this election is because we have a Queen's speech that was blocked by Parliament.
Even though the fact that this passed by 310 votes to 294 is public knowledge. At the point of writing, 8 of their adverts have been banned from Google and 1 has been banned from Facebook. It's no wonder that Conservative MP Dominic Grieve called Boris Johnson astonishingly elastic with the truth.
He is a politician who I simply cannot trust. He's somebody who is astonishingly elastic with truth. I find Boris Johnson an individual who I have regard as wholly insincere and indeed willing to say almost anything to anybody if he thinks it's going to be his advantage at any given moment. I've never experienced a politician in modern British history who is so elastic with truth and also willing to resort to telling whopping lies against other people if he thinks it suits him.
Regardless of your personal beliefs in the parties and their policies, a vote for the Conservatives in this election is an open statement that you're happy being lied to and that this is the direction you want British politics to go in.